Join me as your host, Roderick Swift, every Wednesday, Musicians Matters Podcast, live right here at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Positive Power, 21 Christian Media, LLC. Let's go!
Welcome to our Musicians Matters Podcast live on demand. If you missed any of our podcasts, you can go to Positive Power, 21 Christian Media, LLC, on the Weekend Channel, or Spotify, Google Play, or Spreaker, etc., or my website, drummersunitedinternational.com, and tap in on Musicians Matters Podcast. I would like to thank our sponsors, Stolfo and Associates, 2301 Palomino Lane, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89107, 702 is their number, 258-3034, if you need any assistance and attorney assistance. And TCG Graphics, 2301 West Washington Avenue, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89106, 702-636-3975. Let's welcome my guest, Bruce Harper. How you doing, Bruce?
I'm doing great, Robert.
It's awesome to have you on our show on tonight. I'm very excited because this is one of the things that I've been wanting to know about is big bands. And I know you know well about big bands. So let's get into it.
Yeah, I grew up playing big band music, and when I was a little boy, about 4 years old, that's when the bug got me. My dad was a hi-fi buff. Stereo wasn't around at that time yet, but he was a hi-fi buff, and he brought home some big band records. And one of the main ones he brought was a live album that was recorded at the Hollywood Palladium in 1953 of the Les Brown Band of Renown. And it was a live thing. Jack Sperling was the drummer, who I met many years later. And I was just enthralled with the sound of that music. And so that kind of got me started. And then my dad brought home a 45 of Gene Krupa playing Sing, 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 and I was done for.
He was done for it. Wow.
Yeah. So then I wanted to play drums so bad, and I just would watch TV and just to try to catch a glimpse of a drummer anytime I could, but it was kind of rare in those days. And so I just kept bothering my mom and dad to get me a drum. I wanted to play. And so my mom took me to a summer school, like between 4 and 5 years old, and to see if I could play in their band, and I was too young. They wouldn't take me. So my mom felt bad, and I was crying on the way home, and I was heartbroken. So she stopped off at a local music store and bought me a pair of crash cymbals that were about 5 inches across. I still have those to this day. Wow. And that was my first musical instrument, was banging on those cymbals. So I just loved it. So then went to kindergarten, and the teacher used to pass out rhythm instruments, wood blocks and castanets and jingle bells and different things, and we'd play along. And they had a drum in this cabinet, and I kept begging her to let me play that drum, and she wouldn't let me. And I was so frustrated. She gave me some castanets, and I'm looking at those like, what am I going to do with these things, So then so then by the time I was ready to go into the first grade, my mom and dad had met some musicians around Fort Worth, and they said if he wants to play drums, make him play piano first. And so they started me on piano lessons. So I went to a place where my mother's sister, my aunt Jean, she went to the Fort Worth Conservatory of Music. And this was like a real highbrow classical kind of place. And so here I was already listening to swing. So when I would play my little tunes that I was learning to read, and when I would play my little tunes, I would syncopate them. And so at the end of the school year in the first grade, my teacher said, we think that you would be better off if you found yourself a boogie-woogie teacher. Yeah. So sure enough, I've told my mom, and she had a friend that they went to high school with, and she taught boogie-woogie piano. So I studied with her for the next couple of years and really got into the syncopated boogie-woogie.
Right.
So that got me a nice little musical foundation going. And so then by the time I was in the fourth grade, they finally broke down and bought me a drum. I had a snare drum. So I was in heaven. And so then I went from that, and next year for Christmas, they bought me a set of drums. And I'd seen an old beat-up set in the pawn shop around where we lived, and I would have been just happy with those, anything, any kind of set, but they bought me a brand new set of Slingerland Radio Kings, and so I walked in Christmas morning and saw those, and I was just like, oh boy, here we go. So I took those home and had a ball and started studying with a music teacher, and then I ended up with a real good drummer around Fort Worth, and he taught me for about the next 5 years. And luckily for me, he taught me a few beats to play, but he also played piano. So when I would go for my drum lesson, we would just kind of have a jam session.
Awesome.
And that was just invaluable, because I was getting to do the real deal already right off the bat. So then also in the fourth grade, I joined the band in elementary school, and I was the only drummer. And so when I got my set the next year in fifth grade, I asked them if I could just bring my drum set and play with the band. And they were playing basically marches, but I was like, well, I'd like to play along with those with my drum set. So they let me, and that gave me more experience in the fifth and sixth grade. I did that. So then I got in the seventh grade and went to junior high, or middle school, they call it now, and they had a real dance band there, and I made that dance band right off the bat in seventh grade. So that really got me going, and that year we went up to Denton, Texas, 35 miles north. Right. And I heard the 1 o'clock lab band play for the first time, and I was just blown away. Right. And so we played, and we got, they were critics, and they would write down little things on the papers, and read them back to us. And, yes.
Did they boo you off the stage?
Did they boo me off?
Did they boo you off the stage, or did they like?
No, nothing like that. It was a standard thing where young bands would go, and then the older professors would grade you, and but they would write notes on the papers. And so when we got back, the head of the lab band department said that your drummer Bruce is going to be a swinger. So that really gave me a shot in the arm. I was really happy about that. So I played all through junior high, middle school, and then I was also in the marching band. So I didn't really care for the marching band so much. I liked the dance band. The orchestra was okay, but the marching thing just wasn't my thing. I didn't like that. So when I got into high school, they had a really good jazz band, but they wouldn't let me play in it unless I was in the marching band. So I chose not to be in the marching band, so I didn't play any music in high school. But I was still playing at home all the time. And in the 11th grade, I did study with the 1 o'clock drummer from North Texas, and he was teaching in Fort Worth at TCU, Texas Christian University, and I studied with him the whole year in the 11th grade. So that really got me into learning how to read big band music. That was my first exposure to really reading drum music, because when I was doing the jams with my teacher, we weren't reading really. He showed me a few things, but and even in junior high, I would get these charts, and they just had a bunch of there wasn't anything on the drum charts really. So I just look at them and throw them away and just play, use my ears, So then I graduated from high school, but the whole time in high school, I was at home with my headphones on, and I was playing the records like Stan Kenton and Woody Herman and who else? And Maynard Ferguson. And I had a lot of that stuff down. I could play all that stuff. I couldn't read it, but I could play it.
Awesome.
So then I graduated from high school, and I went straight up to North Texas to be in the lab band department. And I got up there, and I knew how to play big band music, which was a huge advantage, but I couldn't read worth a dang. So I had to start learning how to read, but I had a good memory, so I could memorize all this stuff. And I looked like I was reading it, but I had it memorized, So finally, they kind of caught me because I had to read a certain thing that was written for a drum part, a little drum solo thing that was pretty simple, but I couldn't read it. And so they were like, aha, they caught me, Yeah. So then I started realizing, I got to get on this better, So then I stayed 2 years there, and I moved up band to band to band. I started in the beginner band, lab band, jazz band, and I worked up three bands, and then Uncle Sam called, and right at that same time, my last semester there, I'd started my own rock band.
Wow.
And this was before Blood, Sweat, and Tears in Chicago, and we had a great horn band together with all great players, and we had great music. Guys in the 1 o'clock band were writing for us, and we had a good singer and guitar player, and we made a record, and it was original, and we were ready to go on the road and be rock stars. And then as soon as that semester was up in the spring, I got drafted, and the whole group split up and went different ways. And so I went in the Air Force band for 4 years. So I got there, and they were playing a whole bunch of different music that I wasn't familiar with, and I couldn't feel my way through it like I had been playing the swing music at North Texas. So I had to really start bearing down on my reading.
Right.
So down there, I was in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I met a lot of great rock musicians down there in those days, and I picked up a lot of that New Orleans second line boogie that they were doing. I really liked all that soulful.
That's a good groove, isn't it?
Oh yeah, man. So I picked a lot of that up, but while I was down there, I found a guy named Eddie Kozak that was a percussion teacher there in Shreveport, and he was billed with Xavier Cugat back in the 50s as the world's fastest xylophone player. And this guy, he showed me one time, with 4 mallets on the marimba, he could play 4 different songs at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, he was kind of a genius. So I told him, look, I can read a little bit, but I want you to start me over from ground zero. I want to start with a whole note, and let's get into that and talk about that. And then let's go to half notes, and then quarter notes. And I had him do me a step-by-step thing where I was just completely starting over learning to read. And that was the best thing I ever did. So by the end of my 4 years in the Air Force, I went right back up to North Texas. And from there, I had my reading down pretty well. So I made the number 2 band, and I stayed in that band for my remaining 2 years there. And I was the sub on the 1 o'clock band several times, and I made a lot of rehearsals with them, but I did 2 concerts with them. And so during that time, those 2 years, there were a lot of big bands, famous big band leaders coming through there that were working in surrounding states or in the area of Texas, and they would contract big bands out of North Texas. Mm-hmm. So I got to play a whole bunch of those things. And, I played with Buddy Morrow's big band. I played with Buddy Morrow's small group. And I played a whole year with Les Elgart. And these are all big band things. Bob Crosby had a big band. He's Bing's brother. And I played on his. And Ray McKinley, famous drummer that led the Glenn Miller Band when Glenn died back in the 40s. And he had a great band, and I worked with him quite a bit. Got along with him great. And so that really gave me some professional experience, plus playing in a great band. We had a great band that I played in at North Texas, full of talent and, a lot of great guys in that. So then I left North Texas, and the minute I left North Texas, it was there was no more big band, no more jazz. I was out in the real world all of a sudden. Bang! It was nothing but rock.
Nothing but rock, okay.
Yep. So I got calls to play on some of the rock bands, and in those days there were a ton of gigs around. Every club had a band, and there was no end in sight. It was just a lot of work, and so I started going on all that, but I met up with guys who had never played a lick of jazz in their lives, and they could tell in my playing that I had played jazz. And one of them told me one day at rehearsal, he says, "You sound like a jazz drummer trying to play rock." And so I was like, well, okay. So I, instead of getting mad or something, I took it as a personal challenge, So I put all my jazz away for several years in the 70s, and I just bared down on rock and got into it as much as possible.
Right.
And really honed in on that and learned the disciplines. A lot of discipline. It's different than jazz. Jazz is a little looser and more improvisation, and you can do a lot of different things you shouldn't do in rock. And everything was more groove oriented. You had to really get into the groove. So I got into that, and so in the middle 70s, I was also teaching at a local drum shop, B&S Percussion, owned by Bill and Sis Lacombe, who she was a daughter of Am Rocco. I guess he was Mr. Am Rocco. He made calf drum heads back in the day. And
wow.
And Bill worked for Sonar Drums. So they were great people, and they put me to work teaching kids. And so I did that for about 6 years through the 70s. And I also studied with a studio drummer there in Dallas to hone in on more reading and, more professionalism on drum sets. So I studied with him for 2.5 years. His name was Tommy Gwynn, and he was first call drummer in Dallas for many years. And so he told me towards the end of the 70s, he advised me, he said, you got to do something, because there really wasn't enough work around Dallas. There was work, but you couldn't make enough money, really, to make a living at it. A lot of $50 a night gigs and that kind of stuff. So he advised me to move to Las Vegas. So he was telling me, he said, yeah, they got these orchestras out there, and they got a relief band, and he told me they play everybody's nights off, because all the orchestras were working. Shows were 7 nights a week in those days. And so he was telling me about all this and advising me. He said, if you really want to learn to play, go out to Las Vegas and get on one of those shows. So I thought about it for about probably a year or so, and then all of a sudden I met up with somebody from Vegas and a singer named Marlene Rickey. I met her. I was on the road with Trini Lopez's little brother, Jesse Lopez, and we were playing the Detroit Plaza in Detroit, brand new, beautiful 72-story building, and they had a great club in there. We were playing, and so we were playing opposite Marlene and her band. They were all from Vegas, and she was great. She was awesome, and so that was about it for me. So I'm so excited about playing shows in Vegas. I decided that's it, and I told my wife, I said, we're moving to Vegas, and so we did in 1979. We drove out here, and we just bought a house in Dallas, and we had it for a couple of years down there, and then here I am saying we're moving to Vegas, So we did, and then 6 months after I was here, I was a big band leader. I had never planned on that in my whole life. I played on a lot of big bands, but it never entered my mind that I would be a big band leader, So we were playing, and when I got to Las Vegas, I was in heaven, because it was still full of big bands. Big bands were everywhere, and there was hardly any of that going on in Dallas or Fort Worth. I played maybe 1 or 2 big band jobs a year in Fort Worth and Dallas. And I got out here, and there was nothing but big bands everywhere. I was just like, all right, I'm back to my love. So, yeah, so we were doing all this at the Musicians Union bar. They had a beautiful building and a lounge bar in the back, and it was big, and they had a whole big band set up with risers. They had drums and piano and PA and stands and lights and the whole deal. All you had to do was go in there and meet people, and before I knew it, I was playing on several of those bands. And that's how you got work in those days in Vegas. You go down there and play, and they hear you, and then you get hired for something, you know. And Vegas in those days was a lot smaller than it is now, and it was easy to get to know a heck of a lot of people easily just hanging at the musicians bar, because all the working guys were all hanging in there before the shows, between the shows, and all night after the shows. So it was a great hang. So I was playing on some of the bands, and then a slot opened up, because they had bands playing like day and night in there, like at least 4 days a week, and 2 bands at night, and maybe a band in the daytime too. And so a slot opened up on Saturday nights, and a friend of mine that I moved out here with, Jim Scajari, trumpet player from North Texas, he said, take that slot and put a band together. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't even have any music. He says, find some music and put that band together. I'm telling you. So I went back to Dallas, flew back to Dallas, and went to one of the music stores and bought some charts and traded those with a friend that I knew from North Texas. And so then I had 8 charts, and then before I knew it, I had 16 charts. And I started the band and got it going on early Saturday nights. And there were so many great musicians around that it was easy to have a pretty nice band going. And everybody could read, and it was a real learning experience for me. It was like almost going back to college, all the experience that I gained from being a leader, you know. So I did that for a couple of years in that early slot, and so then the late night slot opened up, and I took it because there were better players that were available for that slot. And that slot started at 1:30 in the morning, and we would play till sunup.
Okay.
And so the guys would get off their shows. They were playing 2 shows a night, for like hour and 40 minutes, and they would get off the shows and then come down there and have what they call fun. They would play some music that was more fun than the show they were playing, you know.
Okay.
Because a lot of them.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Was this at Horseshoe or where? Because I know Horseshoe was the first casino out there, right?
Well, that was downtown. Flamingo was really one of the first casinos on the Strip. It was the first.
Okay.
And but no, this was at the Musicians Union.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and they had a bar in the back, and it was big and nice, and a lot of people hanging in there. And so that's where all that got started. And we were all playing for free, you know, just for fun. It was all for fun. They called them kicks bands.
Okay.
So we, I took the late slot and had that for another, we were there 7 years with my band. And so a lot of great players came through my band in those days, and we had a ball. So in the middle of all that, I had a conductor playing bass trombone on my band, and he was in charge of one of the relief bands, and so he hired me. His drummer retired, and so he hired me to be on the relief band. So I started playing all the shows nights off, and so that was really what my old drum teacher was telling me in Dallas. He had told me about that, but I didn't know what he was talking about. So also, when I first got here, I was checking out all the shows because I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so I kept going up to the band lofts at the Tropicana and the Stardust and the Dunes in those days. And they were very welcoming for anybody that wanted to come in and see what was going on, you know. So I'd sit there and watch them play the show and learn as much as I could and get to know the guys a little bit. And so before I knew it, you know, it took me about 5 years, but in those 5 years of paying dues, I was playing shows already. I played the Unknown Comics, Murray Langston show one summer, and we played comedians all summer, and a lot of them had music to play too. And so it was nice to go to work and laugh all night long and have fun playing, you know.
Wow.
So, because some of these shows were serious, you know, it was like there was nobody in the band was smiling. They're all like sitting on the edge of their chairs playing all this difficult music, you know. So another thing about the music, you know, all the guys in the big band, all the horns have certain notes that they have to play, and it's all written out for them. And but the drums and the whole rhythm section, they have really, it's more of a guide than it is just strict music. So you have to interpret what's on the page. And so that's a whole nother set of skills right there. And that takes years of experience because they don't teach that in school.
No,
you got to pick. What was that?
I was saying, no, they don't teach that in schools.
Right. Yeah. You've got to pick that up, you know, the hard knocks, you know. And one of the bands I played with here was Cy Zentner's band. I played on his band a couple of years after I got here, and I played on his band for about 21 years on and off. And he was great. He had played with the NBC symphonies in Hollywood and done a lot of studio work. Plus, he had his own big band, had a hit back around 1960, written by Bob Florence. It was called Up a Lazy River, and it was on the radio all the time. So he was yeah. You remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. So he was a big star and really knew a heck of a lot about music. So I learned a lot. Every time I played on his band, I learned something valuable. And he came up one time in rehearsal because when I was studying drum lessons, I was taught to read everything, you know, and I wasn't taught how to interpret the stuff. I just was reading. I was playing everything on the page. And he came up to me and he said, "See that 8 bars right there? See all that stuff in there? Don't play any of that.
Exactly.
See over here where it says fill, that's where you play. Play whatever you want right there. Don't play any of the rest of that." And I'm like, wow, but it's written there, you know. And he said, yeah, I know, but he said, you can't make it sound as legato as the horns can. You can't phrase it like the horns can. So don't play any of that. So it was a habit that was ingrained in me to play all that, you know. And so I had to get used to not playing all that. And the older I've gotten, the more I just watch a lot of that stuff go by and I don't play it. But it takes some thinking and some discipline. And when you listen to it, it's great not to play all that stuff. So that's just stuff you pick up with experience, you know.
Awesome. We're getting ready to come to a close, but what's the best advice that you can ever give a musician? To find a great teacher that has professional experience and practice. You got to spend hours. That was another thing I learned. You know, when I was young, I just played drum solos and
and I wasn't really practicing everything I needed to be, but I didn't know I needed to be until I got around some drummers at North Texas that were older than me, and they were spending 4, 6, 8 hours a day practicing.
Wow.
And that was a real eye-opener right there. So when I figured, because I kept saying, how come these guys are so good, you know? And it's like, well, they're practicing all day, every day. I'm like, oh, really? That's what I need to do. Okay. So then I started pouring it on in the 70s, you know.
Wow.
And
That's awesome. Check this out. Let them know about the Bruce Harper band.
Well, I put it together back in 1980, first part of 1980, and we've had it together on and off ever since. The last stint we've been together about 15 years, and we play at the Smith Center. Myron's room at the Smith Center holds about 240 people. A lot of famous people play that room. It's world-class venue, gorgeous room, beautiful sound system, and eat dinner in there. It's fantastic, and it's our favorite place to play. It's just wonderful, and we have a show December 20th. So please come.
How many members in the band?
We have there's 18 of us on stage. We have 17 musicians, including me on drums, and we have a singer, Naomi Morrow, singing with us. She's a world-class jazz singer, and we sell out every show, I'm happy to say, and because we're delivering something to Las Vegas that nobody else is. And we also have a great writer that writes for the band, Al Embach. He grew up in Hollywood and moved up here playing trombone in '66, and he's still writing for the band, and has written some beautiful things for us, and we love him and appreciate everything he's done for us. So he makes our shows even better with his beautiful writing.
Amazing. So I would like to thank you for coming on to our show. And you can always come on to this Musician Matters podcast anytime.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Check this out. We're going to have to have another session, because you have so much knowledge that everybody needs to hear, like I told you earlier.
Well, I would love to do that. Anything I can pass along from my experience, I would love to do that.
Awesome. So I would like to thank Jerry Royce, Live Positive Power 21 Christian Media LLC, for being there as a true brother and a true friend in Christ. And thank you, Tyler Gaston, Gas Station Recording Studio, for all of my engineering works being done for this show. And next week we'll have our guest producer, Wingford Elliott, and it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for and evidence in the things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. Please bless us.
Join me as your host, Roger Swift, every Wednesday, Musicians Matters podcast, live right here at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Positive Power 21 Christian Media LLC. Let's go!
You're listening to Jerry Royce Live Worldwide Podcast.